And welcome to episode number 6 of the QCast. What a guest I have today. I'm going into the belly of the beast, as they say. I'm going to the Big Blue, Decatur, Illinois, the head coach of the Millikin women's basketball team, Olivia Lett. Olivia, thank you for joining me on the QCast. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I don't know if I'm disappointed I'm six or if I'm proud that I'm six.
Well, it's kind of a progression. We got to mix things up, and there's a certain order to this. It's just like a big network lines up their programs in a certain way. This is right where you fit. This is where I want you in the schedule.
I'm pretty proud that I came right after Jack. I'll take that.
We had the greatest player ever for Illinois Wesleyan men, and certainly in the conversation in a big way for the women is Olivia Lett. And we'll let people debate that, but I would say you got a pretty strong case there, Olivia.
I think that there's some good company there. Kendall Sosa obviously has had a great career. Christina Solari was unbelievable, but I do think those two banners helps a little bit.
And we will get into that. And I realize that down in Decatur that they won't like if I make this an Illinois Wesleyan based conversation, so I won't. But we will get into some things related to the Titans. Let's just start out here, Olivia. I think with all the people that I've been talking to, it's hard not to start with what we've all been living through the last 13, 14 months. And you had to deal with it as a head coach, the pandemic. I mean, what a crazy, crazy season. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like coaching through a pandemic?
For as short as the season was, I don't think people realize how long the season felt. From June, we didn't have any idea if we are going to have a season. I think early on there was a lot of optimism that we'd get back to normal by the fall, and then once you hit summer, it kind of waned. But we started practices at the beginning of October. And for us, Millikin was lucky enough that our president was definitely out in front of a lot of things in terms of getting some of that shield testing. And so we were on the one of the first teams to be doing that, one of the first universities to be doing that. And we were able to have some open gyms during different times that other people weren't. So our kids were basically in season from October 1 till whenever it was that we finished. And so it was long for everybody that was waiting to watch and felt like it was gone so quick. It did absolutely. But I think our kids battled through it. We were getting tested 3 times a week, which was always interesting, especially with how much our schedule changed. It was really supposed to only be once a week, but you saw we picked up the Wesleyan game last minute. We had a couple other things where we were just constantly trying to pick up games, and so it turned into just testing 3 times a week. Because you were always going to have different opponents. And that wasn't a big deal, but it's still that anxiety waiting for those test results was different. You just never really knew what was going to happen. You had to be ready to play anybody any given night. And that kind of mimicked the NCAA tournament. So that part of it was cool. You don't know who you're going to play that second night. But I thought overall the student athletes, just battled through a tough season and really tries for the most part stayed focused for all of it. Obviously there were moments that were tough, but overall, hats off to them. And then also our president and just giving us all the opportunities that he did.
And what was that like? I mean, waiting for test results in order to know if you're getting on a bus or whether someone's getting on a bus to come to you. Was that just completely bizarre the way that played out this year?
It was interesting. You're sitting there waiting for your phone to go off, and you'd get 4 or 5 kids that would get theirs right away, and then you'd be waiting another 45 minutes for 4 or 5 kids. And so I don't think anybody has ever experienced something like that, waiting to know if they're going to have a game. But for like I said, for us, we got in on that shield testing, and that helped a lot. Just the turnaround time was so quick for us. A lot of times we got it the same day that we took the test, and that helped a lot. Um, you know, I thought our kids did a good job of just going with the flow on that. Being able to we filmed all our practices just to make sure we knew who was around people. They did a good job of wearing their masks outside of here. We were fortunate enough to be practicing without masks, and so. There was a lot of different nuances that I feel like we actually did have a really good situation here.
Yeah, it was as a fan, it was pretty strange, trying to figure out on game day who was going to be playing or if there was an issue. So I can't imagine what it was like for your coaching staff, for your players, for your athletic trainers. It's a season I hope we never see again. Before we move forward, let me just ask, how are you feeling about the pandemic related to next season? In my heart, I'm thinking a lot of people are getting vaccinated. I got my first shot last week. I know a lot of people that are fully vaccinated. Are you thinking that next year will feel pretty normal, or do you feel like a lot of this will still be hanging over college basketball next season?
I'm optimistic. I do think Decatur's a little bit different because of where it's located, because of the population, those type of things. That life feels a little bit more normal here than it probably does in Chicago or more populated areas. So I'm optimistic. I thought our conference did an okay job this year. I think that the spring sports are doing a good job with getting pretty much their entire season, especially baseball and softball. Volleyball was starting to let fans come in, and so I'm optimistic. But I also we had a pretty good situation here most of the year. So I think that there's probably other teams that if you asked them, they might not be quite as optimistic.
Yeah, let's cross our fingers. If you want to see something that feels normal, come to Texas, by the way, because I'll tell you what, COVID is pretty much over down here. And I'm not advocating for which side I'm on. I'm just telling you that people here have given up on the pandemic, and it feels like life is 100% normal here in Dallas. I can tell you that. We're going to get into your season this year. I want to talk about your kind of getting into Millikin and your coaching background, but let's first kind of dial it way back, because for everybody that's got the coaching bug like you, like that's made a profession out of this, made their life out of this. I guess for everyone like me that's randomly doing podcasts about basketball, at some point we fell in love with the sport, and it's the reason that we're doing what we're doing. So let's go backwards a little bit. We'll get into Pana High School, and we'll talk about what you did there. But when did you start falling in love with basketball, playing basketball? Where were you? What age? Let's kind of start there.
So I grew up around basketball and what I like to think of as another kind of mecca of basketball other than Pana. I actually grew up in Seneca, and so my dad was a football coach there. The time frame of my era that went through there was multiple D1 kids, D2 kids on the boys side mostly, and we all just grew up playing basketball together constantly. And they did a good job of kind of getting sports started at an early age in terms of actually focusing on fundamentals. And, the big camp to go to at that time was Mark Aubrey's. It was called Auball. And so Mark was kind of my idol, which probably had a lot to do with me, deciding to go to Wesleyan. And then Adam Province, another CCIW name, Millikin name, his little brother was actually my best friend. And so from a very early age, I actually was watching CCIW games. And
And let's
so
just pause there for 1 second, because Mark Aubrey, phenomenal player, all-state player. He went to Montana State Division I, comes back to Illinois Wesleyan. Then his cousin, Adam
Province.
Province. You talk about annoying CCIW players right here, Olivia. As an Illinois Wesleyan fan, this kid had the highest socks in the league. He had his socks up to his knees. He shushed the shirt crowd. I believe he was part of the first ever Illinois Wesleyan loss at the Shirk, and he hit some shots and he shushed the crowd. I'll never forget it. That was a great Millikin team, and I like one of your influences in Mark. I'm very annoyed with the other in Adam, and I don't know
they're
what you think about
they're
that.
actually cousins, so it's
Right.
quick influence there. But yeah, those two definitely had a huge impact on my life and career early on. And again, when I transferred, Mark was one that was talking to me quite a bit because I kind of had a similar route going from D1 to Wesleyan. Um, and so that was a big deal for me. And then obviously we moved to Pana. My dad being a coach was a big part of the influence too. I feel like we were always in the gym.
And I ask, just in terms of professional athletes, folks that influenced you at that point when you were just growing up, when you were really young, who were the basketball players that you were looking at on either the college or professional level outside of that bubble in Seneca?
Yeah. So early on, obviously Michael Jordan was huge. That was just after and during the Bulls' heyday. When I got to high school, though, it was all Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson is my favorite player. Pistol Pete is probably up there too. So I like to pass, as odd as that sounds. Since I did score a lot of points, passing is what I like to do, and so MJ, Magic Johnson, those are probably my two favorite.
Yeah, and that does surprise me a little bit that you've picked a point guard and another player who was a phenomenal. The Michael Jordan thing didn't surprise me at all watching your game. So, see, this is why we do the QCast. We learned some things, Olivia. That is news to me that you were influenced by one of the greatest passers in the history of college basketball.
I was a 6 foot point guard in high school, so there's some similarities there. I would absolutely rather pass, but then I think at some point in time I kind of realized that I was gonna have to score because I put a lot of work into it, a lot of time into it, and saw the game a little bit different than other people.
Let's talk about Pana a little bit because you were one of the best basketball players ever to play in the IHSA, boys or girls. You're the all-time leading scorer at Pana High School, boys or girls. And I believe you were fifth in the Miss Basketball vote when you were a senior. You're a two-time first-team All-Stater at Pana. You were a big-time name in the high school scene. What was it like playing for Pana? What were those final couple years like in your high school career? Just kind of talk through that a little bit.
At that time, AAU hadn't blown up the way that it has now, and it was starting to get big. But I never played AAU, and so it was a full year thing, but still playing three sports. And so I was fully invested in what we were doing as a high school team, which I don't think you see very often anymore. People are ready to get to their AAU games, ready to play a million games a summer. It was right after the girls team and the boys team had made pretty long state trips. When we moved down there, the boys had just gotten second in state. And then my eighth grade year, the girls, or sorry, I think the boys won. Maybe they got
Oops, I lost your audio, Olivia.
well. And so those were, it was fun to move to a town that it was a big deal. And then, I got lucky enough to play under Kerry McVickers, who was a big coaching name in Central Illinois. I'd been on the boys' side, came over and was on the girls' side. And from day one, me graduating eighth grade, he said, "You will be playing varsity." And it takes a coach with some confidence and some pedigree to do that, especially with a superintendent's kid, because you're going to have some complaints. And he did it from day one, started me from day one. I remember I turned the ball over, I think, the first three possessions of my varsity career, and he never wavered. And that gives you some confidence as a player. And so it was a lot of fun. We never really made the state run that we wanted to be able to make. But I wouldn't change much about it. I remember at the end of my career, my last 3 years, I get to play for J.R. Baduris, who's now at Rochester, another great coach in Central Illinois. And at the end of my career, he said, this stinks, but I would, if you end up having a great college career, I would trade that for anything. And then when we played in two Final Fours, he was like, this was a lot better than what we could have done. And so that was pretty cool just to have that support through high school and college.
Were you always like a big wing player? Like when I talked to Jack Zickman, he went from being a 6'1" guard to a 6'10" post guy within his
Right.
high school years. Were you always a taller face the basket player, or at some point did someone try to stick you in the low post, or how did that work?
So again, I got lucky growing up with some guys that were really good at basketball. So I grew up with the Callahan brothers that both played Division I basketball. Seth Evans that started at Division I, finished at D2, and I wanted to be able to handle the ball like them. And so from a very early age, we were doing ball handling stuff constantly. And so I was 5'10" ish, 5'9", 5'10" in eighth grade, and was already a guard, and I've never been comfortable with my back to the basket. I got lucky in high school that I was a wing my freshman year, and then after that, JR pretty much moved me to the point guard exclusively. I played with another 5'10" and a 6-foot girl, which you don't see very often in small school basketball. But he didn't want to take the ball out of my hands too much, and so that gave me the opportunity to push us in transition. It's been hard as a coach to transition to coaching smaller point guards because I don't see the floor the same as them, and so that's been something where I think I've started to develop by picking other people's brains. But being a big point guard, I definitely saw the floor different than other people. And when I was at Southern, I was definitely more of a 3, probably exclusively. And then obviously at Wesleyan, I played a little bit of everything.
When you were coming out of high school, you had a lot of college options, so you were heavily recruited. What did the decision come down to? You became a Saluki. We know that Division One. Who else was in the mix at that time you were making your decision?
So, I was starting to get recruited by Division I schools after my freshman year, and that was pretty much when I decided I'm not playing AAU. I'm not going to go chase scholarships. And so I played in small showcases. I played in our high school team always tried to play in a couple NCAA sanctioned events so that people could come see me. And I was pretty much the getting Valley schools to come, whether it was Missouri Valley or Ohio Valley. Those were the two conferences that were on me hard. And Southern was the first one to offer me at the time. Jody Adams, who played at Tennessee, was a head coach at Wichita for a while. She was kind of the lead recruiter on me, and just hearing her stories about Pat Summitt sucked me in a lot. I knew I wanted to go into coaching, and some of the connections that she has, and I still have a great relationship with her and utilize. Those really drew me in. Now I did go play in a showcase going into my senior year and played really well, and had just kind of started talking to Big Ten schools. The Michigan State coach had just been hired, and we had a great phone call. But I was in love with Southern at that point in time, and I didn't want that offer to get pulled. And we were kind of getting to the point where some of those mid majors were going to start offering to some other people. And so I made the decision. I don't know if I would do the exact same thing in terms of timeline looking back, but I also wouldn't end up probably here if that wouldn't have happened.
Everything happens for a reason, right?
Absolutely.
And certainly you're in a great place now. When was it that you hurt your knee? At somewhere along the way, was it at Southern that you were injured?
Yeah, so I tore my ACL the practice before the conference tournament my freshman year. So I've actually had some major injuries and missed almost no games. So I missed one game that year and had to rehab over the summer. I actually ended up getting a second surgery to just scope to clean out some scar tissue at the end of my sophomore year at Wesleyan, and then never had another issue after that.
And talk through, what was the decision to leave Division One Southern Illinois, and how do you end up at Illinois Wesleyan then? What was that whole transfer situation like?
It's tough because as a small town kid, you feel like you're letting everybody down. For so long, you've been that star that everyone talked about you going Division I, all of those type of things. And so it was really tough. I wasn't happy. We had just gotten a new coach going into my sophomore year. My knee was not where it needed to be, and I truly knew at that point in time, if my knee didn't get better, I couldn't play at the Division I level. I was too slow. I couldn't jump, and not that I'm any better at those things now, but it felt worse. And so it was tough to figure that out. I didn't love the game anymore, and that was probably the hardest part, was to admit that, because for so long, the hours that I'd put in, I was a gym rat. I was in the driveway constantly. Like in high school, we lose a game, I'd be out on the driveway and it'd be 2 degrees outside. My high school coach would drive by and he'd stop because he's like, you need to go inside. But that was who I was. And so to not love the game anymore was tough. So eventually I decided, okay, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be this far from home if I'm not going to be playing basketball. At that point in time, there weren't as many Division II schools in Illinois. And so it was kind of, I was transferred mid-year as well. And so I was going to have to sit out a year. Didn't know how my knee was going to be if I transferred to another Division I school. I was talking to a couple during that transfer process as well, had a couple of scholarship offers. But if I transferred to Division III, I could play right away. And so I could kind of get the answer as to whether or not this whole hating basketball was going to go away. And so my dad is a Wesleyan alum. That had something to do with it, obviously. And then Millikin was another school that was in the conversation as well. And ultimately, it came down to a couple different things. My cousin was going to ISU at the time. Again, I hated basketball. So if basketball was going to be done, I wanted to be somewhere where I knew other people and I knew I was going to enjoy it just as a student. And then the basketball side of it, Wesleyan was very good at that point, and I knew that there was going to be a chance to play in a Final Four, win a national championship there if basketball did continue.
So your experience as someone that left Division I to find another fit at another level and be a great player at that level, I would think that has to help in recruiting and believing in who you can recruit. And what I mean by that is I've seen some people come in Division III as a head coach, maybe without a ton of Division III background, and they don't believe they can get a certain player because that player's a higher level. Whereas I guess the ultimate flip side of that is Denny Bridges knowing that Jack Sikma is getting recruited by Kansas State, Illinois, Purdue, and looking him in the eye and saying, Illinois Wesleyan is the best place for you. It has to help you when you're going to recruit Elyce Knudsen and the rest that can play higher to tell them this is why Millikin is the best fit for you. Is that a fair statement that helps you going through what you did?
Absolutely. I think it's twofold. I do think it's gotten a little bit more difficult to steal some of those kids because of the full scholarship with room and board, all of those type of things. It's the same way that it's a little bit different than other sports too, where they have partial scholarships. That part has become a little bit more difficult, but I think selling the idea of being an All-American, being a national champion, we do have kids that had D2 looks or D2 offers, having a chance to go compete on a really, really high level and enjoy the game and being part of a family and all of those type of things. I think that is really important, being able to talk to that aspect from my perspective as well. And it's always interesting when they get in here or they play pickup in the summer or once they do get on campus and I'll jump into things. And I think sometimes that's an eye opener for them too. Like, ooh, it's really good at this level and then a higher level.
Can Elyce beat you one-on-one yet? Where does that stand? If you two played one-on-one, who wins at this point?
She has not beat me yet.
So the best freshman in Division III this year, the CCIW Newcomer of the Year, certainly an All-American in years to come, cannot yet beat her old head coach. Is that correct?
Correct. I haven't given her very many opportunities because I think it's coming quick. And so when she has played me, she has not won yet. There have been some times where I've let her know about it too. When we've played, during season, we had more contact days this year. And so sometimes they were used for other things like pickup. And I've let her know if she walks out of the gym without any wins. And so I'm playing the mental game a little bit with her. Gotta make sure that she doesn't get too much confidence against me because I think I'm going to have to play that game in order to continue my streak.
My prediction is the day that Elyce beats her coach in one-on-one is the day that Millikin truly is a national title contender, and that day may be sooner than later, Coach Lett. Let me tell you that. Let's talk about your professional career just a little bit after college, and we'll talk a little bit about your national title. We'll get back to that. But after college, you decided to play professionally. I think it was for one season in Spain. What was that experience like?
It was interesting. I think it's gotten a lot better with, Zoom and things like that and being homesick and, older me now, I wish I would have pursued another contract harder. It was it was long. Practices were late. Practices were always at 9 p.m. for us. Where I was kind of like Seattle, dark and rained all the time. At one point in time, I looked at it and it said rain for 100% for 3 straight days. And I was like, wow, that is crazy. Sometimes it's raining in Illinois and it's still not 100% chance of rain. So that part was all very interesting. I think people don't realize how tough it is sometimes to play internationally. Basketball was good. They expect the American to do a lot. So they expect him to score a lot. They expect him to guard the best person. It was fun. I'm glad I got the experience. Like I said, I wish I would have pursued another contract harder. I had decent numbers, nothing astronomical, but I probably could have gone back and played. I just didn't pursue it very hard.
And when that ended, when you decided I'm done playing professional basketball, I'm going to come back home and figure out what I'm going to do, was it a no-brainer that coaching was the path, or was there some other stuff that was in the decision process? How did you decide that I want to try coaching?
I think that was always kind of the game plan, was to come back, try to get a GA position. I never really thought about much other than that. And so that was always probably my game plan. That first year I didn't really know, so I was substitute teaching and was just kind of helping out at Wesleyan. And then the following year I was able to start my GA position.
That GA position, that's a really great opportunity for folks that are just out of school, because you get a chance to be a legit coach, recruit, do everything a coach does. At the same time, in your case, you were going to Illinois State, I believe, to get your master's, correct? So you leave that year, that period of time, I should say, with great coaching experience, with a master's degree. And at that point, how did you end up on the south side of Chicago at the University of Chicago?
I had interviewed for some head jobs straight out of that GA position. I actually had interviewed for one and was offered it up in Wisconsin. And at the same time, the Illinois college job came open. And so I ended up turning it down because for me, Illinois college seemed like a dream job. Just being back in this neck of the woods. My sister was there at the time. She had already finished her freshman year and had a solid freshman year. And that was something that I was interested in, was coaching her, because she had already had some success. It wasn't like she hadn't already done well. And so interviewed for that job and didn't get it. So I was kind of in limbo, didn't have a job, didn't really know what I was going to do. And luckily that Chicago job came open late. I just honestly, I never thought that I would enjoy living in Chicago. That's not necessarily my speed, and fell in love with it. Fell in love with the school, the kids that were there. Carissa is a great coach, and she was fun to work for. And I learned a lot while I was there. It was nice to get a taste for a different program, a different style. Our other assistant that was there, Morgan, she's actually on staff with me here as well. She works remotely, but she does a ton for us. And, she spent her career and then some years at Hope College. And so getting her perspective on things has just been huge for my career as well. So didn't necessarily see myself there, but also then when I left, it was very, very hard to leave.
And that really had to be a pretty big change of lifestyle from someone, from Seneca, Pana. So I'm from the south side of Chicago, and I can't imagine doing it in reverse. Like, I went from Chicago to Bloomington, and I was like, what the heck is this thing? So was that a little bit of a culture shock, living in the city and all of that?
Absolutely. Where University of Chicago is, though, it is a little bit slower there in that area. I likened our traffic there to being on Veterans in Bloomington when State Farm gets out, because that was about the speed of it. As long as you didn't go get on Lakeshore Drive at rush hour or anything like that. If you stayed in our little area there around campus, it wasn't too bad. And so I actually really loved that Kenwood area and where campus was, because it was a little bit slower, but then you could go into the heart of the city and find a little bit more to do. So It was a culture shock. I remember one day coming into practice and saying, "Oh, I got on the red line and then did this and was in this neighborhood," and was just listing things off. And Chris was like, "Who are you? And why do you know this all of a sudden?" I was like, "I don't know, but I figured it out. I figured out Chicago." So it was a good experience.
And the league and the school, really different places. You know, the CCIW is a great league, the UAA is a great league, but they're completely different. The UAA, you're flying to conference games, and the type of students, just academically some of the most elite in the world. What was that? What was it like transitioning from what you were used to the UAA? That had to be a pretty big shift.
You know, everybody thinks the travel in the UAA is so tough, and I actually think it's the opposite. I actually think it's kind of easy. You have 3 long weekends, and so yeah, you fly out to Boston on Thursday. We played on Friday, right? So you flew out on Thursday. You would play on Friday. You would bus then to NYU, play on Sunday, and then fly back. But it was a long weekend, but there was only 3 of them. And so I didn't think the travel was that bad. You got to see really cool cities, you know, and then when you're playing at home, you're playing on Friday, you practice on Saturday morning, you got your whole Saturday to do something, and then you play Sunday afternoon. And so that part I didn't think was too bad. The recruiting, you didn't do a ton of it during the season. And so that was nice. Most of it was done before season got started, just because of the way those higher academic schools work. There's early decisions, early enrollments, all of that type of stuff. And so I enjoyed actually the speed of it. You know, the recruiting was different. You were doing a lot during the summer. You had a lot of kids come to you in terms of interest of coming to Chicago, and you kind of it was a little bit D1-ish in terms of you're only taking so many kids, and you've got to make sure that they make the cut academically and then athletically as well. So it was different. I never thought that I would fall in love with kind of that style of it, but I do think that you know, I don't really have any aspirations of Division 1, but it gave me that experience of Division 1-esque.
And so then we get to the point where the Millikin job opens, and that's now an what do you recall about finding out that was open and your process for figuring out how to pursue it and land it?
So it actually came open while our season was still going on. I can't remember if we were already in the NCAA tournament or not when it was posted. But one of the things about Craig White is he typically moves very fast. And so I got my application in before our season was over. Lori Kerans had kind of told me, you need to do it quick. You need to not wait till this is done. And honestly, the whole process was wrapped up 4 days after we had lost in the NCAA tournament. And so we lost on Saturday. I called Craig on Saturday, or we talked on the phone on Sunday. On Monday, I had a in-person interview with just him. On Wednesday, I had an on-campus, and by Thursday, I had been offered the job. And that was actually really hard on me because I didn't want our kids to feel like I had already checked out before we had gone away for the weekend. And so that actually was very, very difficult for me. But it was nice to have it done quickly too. You know, it was something where as soon as it was open, I knew it was going to be something I was interested in. And the CCIW jobs don't come open very often. You know, there obviously North Central came open that same summer, but I do think Millikin is a really good fit for me. You know, 45 minutes from Pana, 45 minutes from Bloomington. My parents actually live in Rochester now, and so that's about 35 minutes. And so it's right in my neck of the woods. You know, I know pretty much every high school coach within 90 minutes, and that's led to a lot of our success recruiting. And so I knew it was going to be kind of a good fit for me if I had a chance to get it. You know, I never knew if they were going to give a chance to a Wesleyan kid, but they did. They got over that, and so that's been good.
Yeah, I think when that opened, everyone looked at it, or at least a lot of people that I was talking to, like, what a perfect fit from where you were from and your history in the CCIW and the potential of you to recruit that Millikin footprint. And the story has checked out, certainly. Talk about your predecessor a little bit. Lori Kerans, legendary coach in the CCIW. In fact, isn't the Player of the Year award named after Coach Kerans? Is that correct?
Yes, I believe it's Player of the Year, and I believe Coach is named after Beth Baker. Is that correct?
That's I believe that's correct. And so really, and won a national championship with the Big Blue. Um, Talk a little bit about where the program Millikin was historically going back 10, 20 years, and kind of what you inherited at that point.
Obviously they won a national championship. The only team national championship here. We do have an individual national champion now. But at that point in time, only a team national championship. And just had so much success, especially during that era. And I think a lot of that had come from recruiting locally. If you look at some of her studs that she had, Lindsay Ipple was a St. Teresa girl. And so I think kind of taking it back to those roots. Obviously, she'd been here a long time. I'm only the third coach in program history. That doesn't happen very often. And so to follow that as big shoes, I think she did a great job of, giving me help to begin with, but also kind of, I don't want to say staying out of the way because that sounds bad, but like keeping herself away to let me go through some of those growing pains myself, because it is tough. You don't want to have to go to somebody every time there's an issue, right? You got to learn to work through some of those things, but she was definitely there, especially early. She still works in alumni and development, and so that those relationships have been good to kind of utilize her to help us continue to grow some of those things. And so she just grew that name to begin with. Obviously there were some tough years before I got the job, and so there was kind of a rebuild feeling, and that was exciting to go into for me. It's interesting that last year or going into this season I realized that it was about the longest I'd been at a place, almost for my whole career. Yes, I had been at Wesleyan for a while, but I kind of left and came back. I'd never really been at a place, including as a player, for very long. And so that was a realization I had. I was like, wow, I've never been to this point.
This is like the longest you've been somewhere since Pana High School, is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much.
4-year commitment was about it for you, because
Correct.
you're in Carbondale for a year, you're in Bloomington for 3, you're in Chicago for a couple. That's a very good observation by you. Maybe something we need to psychoanalyze as we get into the next episode of the QCast down the road. But you're right, it was a rebuilding, because here's the CCIW win totals the 3 years before you got to Millikin: 2, 4, and 3. And so this wasn't like you were inheriting a loaded situation. There was work that needed to be done. Certainly you could lean on the fact that it could be done at Millikin and had been done at Millikin. Millikin had a great program. You mentioned national championship. So you take the team over. First year, you're 4-12 in the league, and then 9-7. And then this year, this is just your third year. You went 8-3 and you won the league. Now, this is a strange year because the championship wasn't determined by the regular season, but I think appropriately by the conference tournament. We'll get into this season in pretty good detail, but this the building process to get from walking in the door to winning the league. What has that 3-year journey been like?
From day one, we said that we didn't want it to be a rebuild. We wanted to be good right away. And one of the things I said a handful of times after we won the conference title this year was, I said it a lot. I'm not sure if I believed that it was true, that we would be to this stage this fast. I knew it was possible, but I also know that our league has been historically very good. And so to say those things and truly be able to do them is crazy to think about. Year one, we were competitive in some games we didn't have any business being competitive in. Those kids really bought into how hard they had to play, and we weren't very deep. We were playing, 6 or 7 kids at our style. That's hard to do. I think I ran Yanni Sadler completely into the ground. And just some of those kids' commitment to what they did. We in that spring they had ran a mile, and then in fall conditioning they ran it again, and then some of them had cut off as much as 2 minutes. And they really bought into what we were trying to do. And so I think that team, even though we only got 8 wins, like that was a big part of us being able to get Bailey, being able to get Abby, was they saw how hard kids played. And so then the next year, kind of started making those steps, was able to have a freshman of the year in Abby Ratch. And then obviously Bailey was a huge contributor for us. And then Miranda stepping up when Aubrey Magro tore her ACL. Those three have kind of changed the program. And then Jordan Hildebrand just staying with it and being our glue person. And so to be where we're at in year 3 is pretty surreal. Like I said, I said it a lot. It still is a very surreal thing.
This year's team was very, very talented and deep. I mean, this is your deepest team because you've now stacked a number of different recruiting classes out there. And I want to start not with the player that got most of the headlines, but with Jordan Hildebrand. We've talked a little bit on the side, and I always compare her to one of my favorite players at Illinois Wesleyan, which is Andrew Zimnick. Just kind of a battler, just a guy like, I don't know what position you call him. You just put him on the floor and he gets rebounds and makes big shots and does big things. She, to me, did all of the dirty work. She made all of the big plays behind the scenes. She also could score a little bit. But talk about your senior Jordan Hildebrand.
Jordan was huge. She actually reminded me the other day that we did have. I was like, I don't remember ever really yelling at you, like in terms of like continuous stuff. And she's like, oh, we had body language issues year 1. I was like, oh, did we? She's like, yeah, we did. I was like, all right, well, good. I'm glad you still remember that. But she has just been huge for us. I mean, she wants to be effective with her shot. She doesn't really care how much she scores, if that makes sense. She doesn't want to go 1 for 8, but she's fine going 4 for 4. Like she doesn't need all 8 shots. She just wants to make sure that she's effective with it. And, what she does for us defensively and rebounding, I mean, just a glue kid, a toughness wise, Bailey and Abby, are more finesse players. And so she gives us a physicality that we don't necessarily have at other positions. And so just the way that she has stepped up and stepped into that role has been huge for us. Going from almost quitting basketball before her freshman year because she was softball basketball and she almost just played softball, and it's having a complete flip of that to where she decided to quit softball and then just has been gung-ho into basketball has been huge. I think she's been first team all conference 2 years in a row, but I still think she's probably one of the most underrated players in the league.
Yeah, and physical is probably the word to describe her. I mean, if you watch just the way she boxes out and battles for rebounds, anyone that thinks Division III is not physical should watch, tapes of this year and Jordan Hildebrand just battling in the low post. And then obviously your superstar freshman. And by the way, is it a silent K or do we pronounce that? Elyce's last name is Knudsen. So
yes.
We're saying the K. I thought
Yes.
so, just making sure. So how the heck do you get Elyce Knudsen to Millikin? Because I know what a higher level player looks like. I've seen a lot of them. I usually know them right when I was like, oh my, like the first game I saw her play this year. I said, how did she get her? So what's the path to land her at the Big Blue?
So Elyce played on Abby and Ashlyn Sturdy's AAU team going into Elyce's junior year. And we saw her up at a tournament, and really she was exclusively kind of a ball handler for them. But I mean, you've seen how she handles the ball. And I was like, that kid is tough. But didn't really score big, was just kind of broke presses for them and just handled it. So we were on her from that point. She played in a tournament here that Christmas, and then we got them to come to our shootout that summer. So she played in our gym, and her cousin is a wrestler at Millikin. And so that was a big help. We kind of used Gus quite a bit. Our wrestling coach was involved in the recruiting process as well. He's from Urbana, and so he had some mutual friends, and it was really everybody was in on it.
Do you remember the moment that you found out that the cousin was there? Like, do you remember? Because this was this like the moment that Denny Bridges found out that Jack Sikma's sister was a student at Illinois Wesleyan? This is,
yes.
I think this is that deal.
Pretty much. We were in, it was actually at our shootout, and she said, well, my cousin Gus actually goes here. He's a wrestler. And I was like, your cousin is Gus? And she said, yeah. I was like, I know Gus. I was like, I know Gus very well.
Oh, I'm sure that the moment you heard that, Gus became like, oh yeah, me and Gus are tight. I have,
Right.
lunch with Gus all the time. Gus became the guy.
Yes, he did. He absolutely became very, very important for our recruiting process. And it was a group effort. Like I said, uh, Ryan Bird, our wrestling coach, was huge. Just being involved with all of it. Our athletic director went and watched her play. At that time, she was potentially going to play softball as well. And so softball coaches were going. I think Tim or I were probably at 50% of her games. I went up and watched the 3-point shootout. We went and watched, I think, 2 different practices. And so it really was. And then she made us wait until about May. I mean, she was a late commit.
Right.
And we joke about that now, but she about gave me a heart attack for pretty much the entire spring.
Well, look, as Danny Bridges used to always say, you got to get off the bus with the best players. You got to get off the bus with the best players.
Absolutely.
And look, in basketball, you've got 5 starters. If you can land an Elyce Knudsen and put other talent around her, you've got a chance to be good very, very quickly. As a freshman, she averages 19 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. I thought it was interesting in the way she plays. You and I were talking months ago during the pandemic, when people are just trying to pass the time, and you were watching Wesleyan game film, and you sent me a text and said, I took some terrible shots. And what I would say about Elyce is she's a scorer, and scorers need to shoot. And I would imagine there's moments when Elyce takes some shots that you would say maybe not the greatest of shots, but keep taking that shot. Is there any comparison here, Olivia, to all this?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think she takes enough tough shots. I get more angry with her when she takes some I'm tired shots. I'm tired, so I'm just going to take this 3-pointer from 7 feet behind the line. I would actually like to see her progress a little bit more into taking more tough shots and really working. And I think you saw that in the conference championship, truthfully. That was where I saw she really, some of those shots other people might not have liked. I would say she didn't take a shot in that game that I didn't like, whether it went in or didn't go in. And so I think because I know what those shots feel like, I'm perfectly okay with her taking it. Now, there's probably a lot of other fans that are like, that's a terrible shot. Or even, sometimes as a teammate, it's like, well, I was open. Well, sometimes her with, 1 or 2 people on her is a pretty good shot for us. And so we talk about how important it is to not let the defense dictate what we're doing. If they're trying to take her away, we can't just succumb to that and not give her the basketball. And so, yeah, I think I probably took worse shots than she's taking right now. But they all look a little bit better if they go in.
One of the other players I wanted to ask about, I think one of the glue pieces to your team is Bailey Coffman, a big recruit for you out of Bloomington Central Catholic, 6-foot combo forward. She's a great 3-point shooter. She can do some damage in the paint. What did she mean to your team this year?
Bailey was first team all conference as a 6-man. That doesn't happen very often. And she really just embraced that role and has been okay with that through 2 years of just understanding that it's not about who's starting, it's about the pieces. She's one of the kids, being a coach's kid, you never know how that's going to go, right? It could be really, really good, or it could be really, really tough. And we can have really open conversations. She asked a question here the other day, and I was like, yeah, we're just not there yet. And I think she gets those things. She understands that it might not be what she wants to hear all the time, but she gets it, and that makes her a better player. She's a 2-sport athlete here. That's tough to do. And she had a great game pitching the other day. And so I think we miss her during the spring in terms of our kids getting in and playing pickup or getting in workouts. But I also think it's a good chance for her to get away. And so she was big this year, just embracing what that role was. And then what she shot from 3 was phenomenal. I think she was over 40. And so we talked about the fact that I don't know if she's going to be able to do that every single year, but if she is, her game's just going to continue to progress. I thought this year she battled through some things in terms of conditioning, but it's more of the mental side of stuff. And we saw her kind of flip a switch in terms of understanding how to really go hard.
Just looking at the three games versus Illinois Wesleyan this year, because it came down to the two schools for the title. The first game was at the Shirk Center. It was a game that popped up literally the day of the game. It was one of these crazy things. I watched that game. It was you guys controlled that entire game, and I felt like that the Titans looked gassed. I remember thinking in the second quarter, there's no way that the Titans are going to win this game. They looked just 3 steps too slow, and you guys really controlled the game at the Shirk Center. And then maybe the next week, I can't remember how soon it was, but they come down to your place, and you really were in great shape after 3 quarters. And then the Titans played like the veteran team in the fourth quarter. Kendall Sosa went crazy. She had 47 points. And then the championship game, the interesting thing to me was almost the reverse. The game was really tight after 3. And you're the team that looked like a little bit more of the veteran team. You guys played with a little more composure in the fourth quarter. Talk a little bit, if you would. Let's go to the game in Decatur. Boy, Kendall Sosa was, other Titans played great. 47 points. Talk about her performance in Decatur that night.
Yeah, she didn't miss. I thought we got tight and started to play to not lose. And so offensively, we were taking different shots. We weren't as aggressive. And I think we weren't as aggressive defensively either because of that. We were trying to not lose. I know a couple times against the zone, we just got sucked in too far. And I thought we refocused then for the next game in terms of how to defend her a little bit better, how to be more aware. I think defensively, that was us being young and not understanding how to play our defense, but be aware of where certain people are, whether that's in the zone or in man. And she just, she didn't miss. And whether that was from the free throw line or from outside, that's going to change stuff. I think she only had 25 with like 5 minutes to go. So most of it was in that last 5 minutes and overtime. And we didn't really make an adjustment. I thought I should have called a timeout at the end of regulation. So I was beating myself up about that afterwards, just to kind of change some things. And so I think there was kind of a group effort in terms of we need to refocus after that. We also went through a stretch right there where we're not in necessarily that game. That was our third one in, I think, a week. But by the time we got to North Central, it was our 5th in about 10 days. And so I think I learned a lot during those 5 games about how to better prepare us for later in the season in terms of minutes and legs and things like that. And not necessarily in that Wesleyan game, but I thought that in the North Central game, I did some silly things in terms of minutes that in the long run killed us. So I think we were better prepared for those situations than in the conference tournament.
The conference tournament championship game, Big Blue versus Titans, obviously an intense game. It was really amazing to me this season how much intensity there was in these games without fans. I'm thinking of the Illinois Wesleyan Wheaton men's game. You could just feel that. In the Illinois Wesleyan Millikin women's game, you could feel that. You had a lot of players play well in that game, but Elyce Knudsen late in that game, she was good all year. But for a freshman, she made some big shots, made some big plays to kind of seal that thing. What was your take on the way that game concluded, kind of the third, fourth quarter play there?
She was locked in, I thought, all game. She had a shot early where she came off of a ball screen, and I actually thought she should have made the pass to Jordan because Jordan was real open on it. And she hit the shot while she was kind of still turning in the air. And I was like, oh, okay. Like we're gonna take and hit those type of shots today. And I thought you just saw that the rest of the game. She hit a tough shot that she held her follow through for a while, and that I think it was to end the third quarter. That she was feeling pretty good, pretty locked in, and when she gets excited, and she did in that game about some shots. she's ready to go and she's locked in. And I thought you saw that in the first half, and then in the second half, it was just a straight focus. I think she was actually exhausted. She talks about how she's like that girl had to thought I was crazy. Like I sounded like a panting dog on defense. Like I was like breathing so heavy. And so at that point, I was calling timeouts to keep her and Jordan on the floor when we were doing it. How can we get them a break? And so she just I thought she was the best player on the floor that night. And I think I even set foot on the floor a couple of times. So I think she would have beat me that night.
I'm still looking forward to the results. I want scores of all these one-on-one games whenever they play out. Just a couple more topics. I want to ask you about recruiting in general and the pandemic. This is interesting. This has really impacted things in different ways. But first of all, there's 8 million people in the transfer portal. So you have that happening at the higher levels, the scholarship levels. I think in some ways the pandemic has pushed kids to commit earlier in some situations at the Division III level because they're worried about spots. The thought that there's this waiver of eligibility where seniors and other classes can return. So I better get my name in there now and get my name on the list so I've got a roster spot. That's just how I'm looking at it. How is the pandemic, how is it impacting recruiting at the Division III level?
It was weird to not be in gyms this year. To be honest with you, I'm kind of happy that we weren't able to very much because of how intensive our schedule was. It would have been tough to be playing, not know when you're playing, not know when you're practicing, and then trying to go to high school games. And so there was a little bit of relief not needing to do that nearly as much. It's been tough to get kids on campus. And I think that's a big sell for us is getting a chance to be around our kids because we want kids that fit our culture. Like you see the style we play, it's tough. You have to be well conditioned in order to do it, and that's not for everybody. And so it's important to get kids around our players so that they get a chance to know what it's really like and to know what their personalities are like. And so that has been tough. We've gotten kids on campus a little bit, but I think that has been interesting. But yeah, we had commits probably earlier this year than we've ever had in my 3 years. And I don't know whether that's where we've had more success. And so that's some of it, or if it's a pandemic thing. But it has definitely been a different time frame than usual.
Yeah, we'll see how this plays out in the whole transfer portal thing. I'm positive there will be a lot of transfers that end up filtering into great Division III programs because what's going on. The numbers would suggest so, but I guess we'll kind of see how that plays out. Just a couple more topics. Let's talk about your 2 Final Four runs at Illinois Wesleyan. You had a great career at Wesleyan. You were part of 3 CCIW championship teams, I think both regular season and conference tournament, which is really, really hard to do in a great league. And you made 2 Final Four runs. And the first one was your junior year, and the Final Four was at the Shirk Center. What was that like going into? I mean, was there tons of pressure on you guys, feeling like here we are on our home floor, playing in front of our own fans? What was that like playing in the Final Four at Illinois Wesleyan?
That's an experience that I still talk about with recruits a lot because I don't think you can really mimic that in terms of even at the Division I level, or probably even less so at the Division I level, is getting a chance to play in front of all your family and friends for a national title. Now, I think, conference titles, I think we'd probably pull similar crowds, truthfully, because of how much local support there are behind different teams. I would have liked to have seen the crowd for our conference title game this year because I think it would have been huge. But it was really cool, getting a chance to play at home. I don't remember feeling a ton of pressure. Getting a chance to play WashU was cool. I actually started off really hot in that game, and so I think it was an extra, like, this is a fun experience. It was tough to come back the next night, I will say that, knowing that you didn't have a chance at the national championship. But I think our Final Four game was like 83-82 or something like that. It was very high scoring. It was a shootout, which is a fun game to be part of because people are hitting shots, and as much as people like defense, it's still more fun to watch a game where people are hitting shots.
Then the next year, the Final Four is in another great Division III venue, DeVos Fieldhouse at Hope. But to get there was a super dicey moment for the Titans at versus Mount Union. I think the
Right.
game was in Kentucky, right?
Uh, the game was at Capitol,
At
right?
Capital. So the game's at Capital
I think
against Mount Union.
that might not be right. It wasn't at
I think
Capitol.
I swear the state of Kentucky is stuck in my head. We'll have to check this out. We'll
We
prove
were at
ourselves right.
Thomas More and Thomas More the first weekend, and now I can't remember. We weren't at Mount Union. I think it was Mount Union at Mount Union. It was. It was
Okay.
Mount Union at Mount Union.
Okay, you could be right about this.
They're purple, right?
Yes.
Yes.
They're
it was
for
Mount
sure
Union
purple.
At Mount Union. Yes.
But the game, final seconds, I can't remember if they missed a free throw. Did they miss a free throw? Is that how that possession started? They missed a free throw. Ball gets in your hands pretty quickly, right? Did you end up bringing up the floor?
No. So Karen Solari gets the rebound, passes it to me, but I was not expecting the ball at that point. And so I pass it back to Britt Hasselbring so that I can go get down the court. I get down the floor, Britt drives baseline and is able to kick it to me.
Kicks it to you. 12-footer, 15-footer, somewhere in there?
It was like a 4-footer. Like I stepped in about halfway up the lane and just stepped into it. It wasn't a layup, but it was
kind of a weird distance. I remember.
Yes.
It certainly wasn't a layup. It wasn't a 3-pointer, but it was a tweener distance that was a little awkward. You make it, you win by 1, and every national champion has a moment in their run that they can look back on, almost all of them, and say, had we not survived that,
right? And
you go on to Hope, and you beat St. Thomas, and you beat George Fox for the national championship. What was that? I mean, what was that like to cap as a senior, to cap your career with a national championship? Had to be pretty darn amazing.
After that junior year, we weren't really supposed to be where we were either. And I think sometimes that gets forgotten. We graduated a ton. And so we actually started that year, I want to say 3 and 4. And I remember sitting and talking to Mosey, and he goes, "You guys aren't going to be 500 this year." And I remember bawling because I was like, "Oh no, we can't end up not 500." And
well, there's a couple takeaways here. First of all, is this the first time Mosey Thompson has made the QCast? That's big time. Second, I would say that Mosey says a lot of things, and you should never cry when Mosey says these things, because that's why he's trying to get under your skin. We'll have Mosey on the QCast sometime. I'm not sure if the FCC will allow that or if there's any regulation, but I just had to pause there because Mosey was mentioned on the QCast. Continue, please.
He made it this long, and this is the first time he got mentioned.
It's pretty big time.
From that point though, we went, what would that be? Something and 1. We lost a double overtime game at Wheaton, I believe, was our one loss. And so to even be back in the Final Four was like, wow, what have we done? And so that was really cool. Hope is obviously an unbelievable facility. And so to be able to play in a Final Four there, it feels like a Final Four. It feels big time. They do a great job putting it on. St. Thomas is a very solid team and has continued to get better. Ruth has done a great job up there. And it'll be interesting to see them at the Division I level next year. And then we were down pretty big to George Fox again, who we had the big comeback the year before against. And so it was I think it's the lowest scoring national championship game ever, potentially. I know it was at that point. And so it was a fun year. One of the things now that is tough is I don't know what our seniors feel like when we lose that last game. I have no idea what that feels like. And it's obviously cool to have that. But it is hard to relate to your kids when that moment happens of it all being over. And so no one really goes out on top. And so it was very cool for us to be able to finish our senior year that way.
Yeah, kudos. I remember watching that game. I was in Salem, Virginia with the Illinois Wesleyan men's team that weekend, and just never forget watching that all play out on watching a little laptop at the scores table. So, huge thing. Anytime you can hang a banner and end your career that way, very few people can say that. Just a couple more questions as we
I
start to
got a
wrap.
piece of trivia for you. Do you
What do
know
you
who
got?
the only two people are that were at the men's Final Four and our Final Four that year?
Denny Bridges,
Nope.
Mosey,
That's one of them.
Mosey Thompson, and
President Wilson.
oh wow, that's impressive. He was at
Yes.
both.
What'd you say?
He said he was at both.
Yes, President Wilson and Mosey Thompson were the two people that made both of them. Flew back after the men had lost, and I believe President Wilson might have flown straight there, but then Mosey drove up. So
That's pretty amazing because it's not easy to get from Salem, Virginia to Holland, Michigan, by the way,
correct.
right? And there wasn't a lot of turnaround time there.
Right.
Yeah, that was quite a weekend to have both of the programs playing in the Final Four. Incredible. Let's talk just a little bit the state of women's college basketball, the state of women's athletics. There was a situation recently at the Division I Final Four, and with the weight rooms and everything. So you're well aware of this. So that kind of the tweet about this is their weight room, this is our weight room. That's one small example on this topic. What is your take, Olivia, on kind of the state of women's athletics, of women's basketball, of gender equality? Where I know that's a huge topic to lob at you, but what are your thoughts on where we stand and where we need to go?
I think women's basketball has made some huge strides, and we might have had a better tournament for the last 3 or 4 years in terms of competition from Sweet 16 on. The games these last 2 weekends on the women's side have been unbelievable, and I think just seeing that all over Twitter from not just women's basketball players has been huge. The notoriety that you're getting players like Paige Beakers and Caitlin Clark getting the publicity that they deserve, but it's also because they're really, really good players. And I think the quality has continued to go up. Yes, there was plenty of good players back in the day, but I don't think as even across the board. Now you're getting more teams with players like that. And so that has been amazing to see. And I do think that women's basketball would kind of be able to support itself now in terms of, I don't think it's just the men's basketball tournament propping it up. And I think that's why you saw so much of the outrage over the weight room and some of the other inequalities, is because women's basketball is supporting itself at this point. You've got some of those big time games on ESPN with some of the big time sponsors, and that wasn't the case years ago. Those sponsors didn't want to pay for those spots, and so that's where I think a lot of the frustration is. And then just the support of women in coaching in general. The child care at the Final Four and NCAA tournament was suspect at best, and breastfeeding babies were counted towards the travel party. That's tough. That's not really supportive of wanting women in coaching, and so that's kind of where you see some of that outrage from too.
Anything at the CCIW Division III level regarding women's basketball that you point to and say we got to get that in a better place?
I think our league, I think our presidents do a good job of trying to make it equal. I don't think that I necessarily have anything where it's like, oh, there's a vast inequality there. I think we're doing a good job of trying to just support student athletes in general.
Well said. Well said. And I'm sure when I compare things to, look, when I was in school at Illinois Wesleyan in the early 90s, to look at where CCIW women's basketball was then to now, incredible progress. I mean, amazing progress, and a lot more to go. So I'm glad we covered that. Division III, and this is kind of where we'll wrap it up, and then I'll give you a chance to make any final comments. You're a Division III person now. Did you ever see that when you're at Pana? Did you ever see yourself as someone that was known as a Division III player, a Division III head coach? You kind of get sucked into this Division III thing. Did you ever see this coming?
No, I mean, in high school, I had the same, thoughts that a lot of kids do. I wanted to be at the Division I level. I wanted to be at the scholarship level. I wanted to help my parents out in terms of being able to pay for the college side of stuff. But I think every time that I've been paid for basketball in terms of as a player, I didn't love it as much. I didn't put in as much time, even when I was playing professionally. Like it took some of that joy out of it for me. And so while you're not technically paid at Division I, you are. You're on contract. And so I spent more time in the gym at Division 3 level than I did at the Division 1 level. And I tell kids that all the time. And so that's really what our program is founded in. And so I've fallen in love with the type of kids that are here. Now, I think that you got to really work to find those kids that want to put in that time, and that want to be at this level, and that value the education side of it, and those relationships, and playing in front of their family, playing in front of big crowds that maybe you don't at the Division 1 level. A lot of those gyms are empty. And so, no, I didn't see myself here, but now I don't see myself leaving. So I guess that's how it goes.
And that's good to hear, because I think that those of us that have kind of fallen in love with Division 3 have a story just like you for the reason we have done so. Just a final comment on my end, then I'm going to kick it to you for any final words, which would just be thank you for all of this time. We've spent a lot of time in a busy period of time. You're still recruiting and you have a lot of things going on. It's Easter weekend, so thank you for this. We're very proud of your career at Illinois Wesleyan, and even though there's no question when the green and the blue play each other who anyone from Illinois Wesleyan is rooting for it, I think that you would see that many of us have been strong supporters of the Millikin women's basketball program the last 3 years, and we will continue to do so as long as you're there. That is, the moment you leave, that ends, Olivia. Let me just tell you that right now, so you better stay there. So we're very proud of what you've accomplished on and off the floor. And certainly, while the conference championship game this year was very painful, it was nice to see someone that's put in so much work have success. So kudos to you. I'll give you any final words as we conclude here today.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. Like you said, the support that I've gotten, I think Wesleyan is a special place because of that. I think Millikin is a special place because of that. I think the CCIW is a special place because of that. I think they take care of their own. I think you see that with just the coaches that are back in the league or that have some type of tie to the league. It makes it really hard to leave places like this because you do create those relationships and those people essentially saw you grow up. And I think that's what's really special about Division 3 and special about some of these universities. So I appreciate it. I appreciate all the support that you give us. I stay, with D3 hoops, all of that, the amount that you guys advocate for our kids in terms of awards, in terms of publicity, all of those type of things. I wouldn't be where I am without that. And so I appreciate it. Thank you for all you've done and for having me on.
I appreciate that. Olivia Lett, the all-time leading scorer at Pana High School, a national collegiate champion at Illinois Wesleyan, and the champion of the 2021 CCIW champs, the Millikin Big Blue. Painful for me to say, but happy for you, Olivia. Thanks for all the time today, and I look forward to chatting with you really soon, okay?
Thank you.